Retail has been a game of getting the right product in front of the right customer at the right moment. But the economics of doing that have changed dramatically. Acquisition costs are up. Loyalty is harder to earn. Promotions that used to move the needle are delivering diminishing returns. And in a tougher, more fragmented environment, retailers are being asked to prove that every dollar they spend, whether it be on offers, incentives, and engagement, is actually working. That pressure is changing how the smartest retailers think about growth. They're moving away from broad-based promotions towards more targeted, measurable strategies that connect offers to outcomes. And it's changing what winning looks like in a cross-border retail environment where the competition for consumer spend has never been more intense. Today on Retail Untangled, I'm joined by Johann Suchon, Senior Vice President of Consumer Acquisition and Engagement for APAC at Mastercard, a business with visibility across payments and consumer behaviour in this region that most retailers really just don't have access to. We're going to get into what the ROI pressure on retail is actually changing, what it takes to win and retain consumer spend in a more competitive landscape, and what the retailers getting this right are doing differently. Welcome, Johann. Welcome to Retail Untangled, Johann.
Thank you, Amie. Thanks for having me.
It's a big show here at NRF.
It's huge, actually. Yeah, it's much bigger than it was 2 years ago, and was a bit surprised to see how many booths and expo we have here today.
Yes, it's excellent. So
Amazing.
Retailers are under more pressure than ever to drive measurable growth, but the environment they've been operating in is more fragmented and more competitive than it's ever been. From where you sit across payments and consumer behaviour, in this region, what's actually changed, and is the way retailers are responding keeping up to pace with that?
Well, big question.
Just that small, big question to start.
Big start. Just, I think first the fact that we see so many solution provider today shows how much the market is becoming fragmented, right?
Yeah.
A few years back, you had no agentic commerce, you had limited AI. Personalization was starting to be there, but still in a relatively limited framework. Most of it was linked to loyalty programs. And what we can see today, and again, I didn't have time yet to see all the booths, but clearly there's no one single provider with not mentioning data or AI or engagement somewhere. So clearly for retailer, I would say the overall ecosystem becomes way more complex than it was a few years back, which is, again, like all crises, is a good side and bad side, right? The bad side is indeed, I think if you are a retailer today, you need to question yourself on how do you want to engage your consumer, right? Because you have so many opportunities and so many channels you can use. Which one is the most efficient? Which one is the one you need to let it go? What is the one that provides good ROI? How do you manage your own offers, etc., etc.? But then the good side is actually, if you are a retailer, you have to ask yourself all this, right? Because you have way more way to engage your consumer than you had before. So I think the biggest way actually the retail world has been evolving in AP is the fact that indeed there's way more options now for a retail or a brand to engage with its own consumer. And the fact that they need also tools that enable them either to be focusing on one single channel, or if your business permits it, actually to engage across multiple channels.
That makes sense. Some promotions or broad-based promotions have long been a very big part of that. We've got, the blanket discount, the sidewise sale, big events like Black Friday or 11/11. They've been the default growth lever for so long. What's the evidence that they're losing their effectiveness, and why are retailers still so reluctant to move away from them?
That's a big question, right? I think I would not say that Asia or APAC invented the concept, but the double 11, double 6, double 8, double 10, double 12. I mean, it's like booming everywhere, right? So, and all those actually promotions have the same pattern or same concept, right? It's a one day, it's flash, it's usually high discount. It's limited to a few SKUs or a few products. It gives very high visibility for a brand as a flash. It also gives very high predictability, right? Because if you are in AP, logistic is obviously a very big topic, big issue. At least you know that for this special event, you can actually engage or prepare all your logistic to fulfill all the needs you have. So I think it's not going to disappear for those reasons, right? It gives very high visibility. As a CFO, usually you like it because it's a good way to actually predict very well how your budget is going to fit with the peaks. As a logistic operator, also you like it. Now, it's going to evolve and be complemented by more targeted campaigns, because what we can see is that it generally gives very high results on a one-off, but it has very low impact as a recurring revenue or recurring way to engage your consumer. And this is where personalization needs to kick in, or at least complement those offers. Then it's also linked to the ecosystem of Asia, right? When we actually very high, or very significant marketplaces in China initially, then actually spread out across all Southeast Asia. And this is part of their model where actually they need to have this kind of high level engagement very short term, so that actually they can repeat the engagement with their consumer for their own platform. So from the platform side or the retail media side, they are not going to change it because it's part of their own model. As a brand, you definitely has a value on the short term, but you also need to complement with actually more, I would say, recurring engagement, which necessitates personalization versus this one of blanket kind of offer.
Reaching a consumer at the consideration stage before they've decided where to buy is where the real acquisition battle is being fought. What does visibility across payments and consumer behavior tell you about how that window of influence is shifting?
That's a very good question. I think more broadly speaking, this is where we see the evolution of the ecosystem integrating payment and brand getting actually dominant. As you said, brands now or retail need to engage in a more proactive way or earlier at the stage of the intent of the consumer, and not anymore being reactive once actually the consumer is able to reach their own channel, their own website, their own app, or their own store. And this is where payments become critical, because not only it's actually a checkout option, but also it's a gateway to derive and influence the consumer through the element of all the data that actually payment gets out of the brand itself. So the way brands can influence using actually payment data is way stronger than what they can do only leveraging their own first-party data. And this is actually a big value for a brand to engage with payment players like Mastercard, but any other actually scheme will have the same opinion.
And are most retailers, obviously the retailers that you work with, but more broadly, are retailers using that data to their full advantage?
Becoming more and more. I would say we are at the beginning. The concept of leveraging payment data to enrich actually the reach with consumer is not new. I mean, Mastercard, for example, have been operating card-linked solution for decades. The difference now is the scale and the magnitude. Initially, those card-linked solutions were very useful for two reasons. One, for brands which did not have directly access to the transaction data. If you're a shopping mall, for example, you tend to be very transaction poor because your tenants will get the data from the POS. So card-linked solution was a good way to engage loyalty for this kind of player. Now it's becoming different. I think the card-linked solution now enable the brand to reach new consumers, not only actually to be a solution to acquire consumer, but also to reach actually a consumer in a way they couldn't before, thanks mostly to the data that are relevant to the share of wallet, for example, or just behavioral data, which now start to be way more precise in terms of targeting than it used a few years back.
That makes sense. So loyalty programs have been proliferated to the point where most consumers are members of more than they can count. I am one. I'm probably one of those people. What separates the ones that are actually changing purchase behavior from the ones that are just collecting signups?
I think loyalty programs overall are really in the middle of a major transformation.
Yeah.
What you mentioned here with actually consumer being collectors of loyalty cards is not something specific to AP. Or are you from Australia, right? So
I am.
Yeah, it's a big loyalty market overall. But I mean, it's across the globe where acquiring consumer is now not really a problem right now, because you have so many channels that the brand can reach, that the reach is not really becoming an issue. The relevant reach is actually becoming the main target. And again, relevancy of offers and benefits was not a strong point of loyalty program until now. You tended to have the same benefits for all the cardholders, or as a member of the program, you tend to have actually the same offers or rewards as any other consumers. The fact that now loyalty program can enrich their own data with payment data actually allows them to pinpoint in a much more precise way actually the offers that can be relevant to the consumer. Also, I think one of the big change of loyalty program is the expansion toward partnership, not necessarily only with payment, but also across different industries, where brands start to see more and more the benefits of actually complementing their own data with other industries that may not be competing with themselves, but that can match very well with the segment of consumer they target. And again, this was tactically here and there very well done. Again, Australia, for example, is one of the flagship markets where there's a very high level of maturity of cooperation between brands, but it's not necessarily the case everywhere. And we see this model becoming more and more actually a standard model across the industry.
Now, cross-border retail competition in APAC has intensified significantly. Consumers in this region have more options than ever and less friction switching between them. What does it actually take for a retailer to win and retain spend in that kind of environment?
A good question here. I would say again, it depends. It depends a little bit. First of all, when we say cross-border, there's two cross-border, right? There is a cross-border when you are a retailer in Singapore or brand in Singapore, and you want to make sure that Indian, Chinese, Japanese, French, Australian tourists actually go to your store and shop, right? So that's the first cross-border. The second cross-border is the one where you are actually on Amazon, and you want to make sure that a consumer out of the US, for example, go shop in your Amazon US store. So we see actually definitely a trend in growth, very significant growth in both cases.
Yeah.
Now the one where obviously we see a huge benefit is this first one, where we want to make sure that tourists, business tourists or traveling or just a leisure tourist, are able to benefit from the best offers from actually the brands in the I would say inbound market. So make sure that they shop properly and they have actually incentives to visit all those stores. So this is where also linking solutions such as Mastercard of our network, for example, really is super helpful for them because they have a reach which is out of their market, which usually as a brand or retailer will have limited visibility on curated and very secured segment coming from the banks out of your own country. And again, with full attribution because again, the cost of such operations of marketing from the brand is actually only triggered once the offer has been redeemed. So there's very high ROI, very high visibility on targeted segment. And again, beauty of it is that you can switch on, switch off at will as a brand.
Yeah. Now, targeted measurable offer strategies sound straightforward in principle, but they require a level of data sophistication that most retailers haven't reached yet. What's the realistic starting point for a retailer who knows their current approach isn't working, but doesn't know where to start?
I think this is, again, we are in the middle of the NRF today, so I think there's plenty of solutions everywhere. Just my eyesight can see at least two brands which actually will provide this kind of solution to any retailer just now. I think the targeting and personalization of offer used to be a very strong point of loyalty program. So by definition, brands who already operated loyalty solution had the ability to provide relatively high level of personalization in terms of messaging to their consumer. It's true that if you didn't have a loyalty program, it was much more difficult for a brand to be able to adjust to any personalized offer you wanted to do. I think this is changing a little bit. Now, obviously, the brands who have invested in loyalty program, it's not like wasted investment typically. And the more they go, they have structured, for example, very well their own data stack. So they have an edge, especially when we start to talk about how to integrate agentic commerce, for example. Yeah. Clearly, if you have done your homework and develop a loyalty program a few years back, then you already know how to structure your data in a way that SEO or GEO will be able to optimize. So clearly, you are one step ahead. Nevertheless, it's not a lost cause for the other. Clearly, for two reasons. One, because GEO is going to change the way brands will have to operate their tech. So what was working with standard SEO may not be necessarily working 100% now. So anyway, everybody needs to restart at one point. The second reason is that one of the misconceptions of personalization is that you need to have a huge data stack and super powerful loyalty engine or CRM engine to operate your campaign. the fact that actually there's no need now, or not a necessity for brands to have actually this very complex or comprehensive tech stack, because you can work with partners such as Mastercard of our network, indeed, where all the personalization actually is powered by the Mastercard solution. So as a brand, you just need to define what are the use cases you want to generate. You want a lapsed customer, you want to reactivate dormant segment, you want to have a higher share of wallet, etc., etc. Plus, what is the offer you want to actually benefit or provide to the cardholders? And then Mastercard system actually automatically generate all those segmentation, personalization, etc. Obviously at a fraction of a cost of having actually to develop by yourself your own personalization engine. So that's the first thing. The second reason is the fact that AI is there. And actually, one of the big use cases of AI today in terms of solution is to enable personalization at scale. What was extremely complex before was to identify which segment for which product, for which criteria, for which profile, at what time, etc., where even you were aided by very powerful Excel powered solution, still require a lot of expertise and tech. And now, again, an AI LLM actually can do that for a fraction of a cost and at a speed that is way bigger than what you have. So, of course, you still need to have, we say, a structured tech stack and data lake. However, you don't need to invest anymore in very lengthy system deployment, etc.
Far more accessible.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, Mastercard sits across an enormous volume of transaction data, no doubt, across this region. What does that view tell you about consumer behavior in APAC retail that most retailers simply can't see from their data alone?
Okay. First of all, obviously, it's perfect complement of first-party data that most of the brands will get, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that one is replacing the other. It's more really a perfect complement. Now, in terms of behavior, what is interesting is, for example, if you look at the cross-border transaction in Asia-Pacific, today, 70% of those transactions are actually coming from Asia-Pacific consumers. So the fact that actually cross-border are becoming more and more, important, and it's even more important that the consumer are sitting in AP itself, which is actually a pretty significant change from a few years back when most of the cross-border were coming from out of IP at that time. Also, one thing that we are learning, and we're actually building the model as we speak, is the fact that because we're able to get data out of the universe of the merchant or the brand, we are also able to define behavioral insights that are very different from actually insights you can get only looking at transactions coming from one single industry or one single store.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what regional variations are you seeing, particularly between mature markets and those that are still developing?
It's difficult to talk about mature and non-mature market in AP. First, it's a super diverse market. However, I mean, you can claim that a market, for example, Australia, is indeed very mature because loyalty and data-powered marketing campaign have been operated for decades already there. Plus, the merchant overall are extremely familiar in the way they can use actually and leverage data for their own marketing campaigns. So in this kind of markets, which I would say Singapore or Hong Kong or even somewhat Japan, maybe a bit similar. The demand from the brand on personalization is way bigger. So and consumers also are expecting, and maybe to your point, you have a lot of cards, you don't really necessarily use them, is because they may not be personalized enough.
I dare say, I'm scarred.
So clearly, I mean, this is now becoming a mandatory element of overall consumer engagement and loyalty programs. And other markets in AP are not necessarily not mature, just they're different. They leapfrog actually the different step of development of loyalty program. Obviously, markets like Southeast Asia are very dependent on a mega app, right? The Gojek, the Grab, or the Chinese equivalent of the world are driving a significant part of the consumer engagement because they integrated day one payment, consumer insight, and actually brand engagement. And this is actually something that is very, very different from what we have in the other markets. So that's also the beauty of being here in Singapore across APAC in this kind of topic is the diversity of the the issues or topic or challenges we have to face, and then the solutions we need to define to help all those brands engage properly their consumers.
Yeah, it makes sense. So speaking of customer engagement, where do we go from here? And what does the retailer who gets this right in the next 2 years look like compared to those that are still running that same old playbook?
I think the one that actually are evolving in the way they engage with the consumer have a higher chance to see NRF 28, right, than the one who don't. It's difficult to predict. I don't have a crystal ball here, but clearly
Why
we
ever
see
not?
we see that there are definitely trends. I would say personalization, relevance, engagement through partnership. Those are not like options for brands or retailers. This is something that is becoming but mandatory, whether it's partnership with financial institutions or across different industry verticals. But I think it will be becoming more and more difficult for a brand to be silo in its own approach of consumer engagement. Even I think almost impossible once you start to think about the level of engagement or the options to connect with clients across multiple channels.
We're probably already
becoming,
starting to see it in some ways.
yeah. I think it will be becoming impossible for a brand to stay again in his own single universe without connecting with the other part of the ecosystem.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Retail Untangled, and a big thank you to Johann Suchon from Mastercard for joining me live from NRF APAC. To be the first to know when the next episode lands, like and follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts.